So there's no UFC on next weekend, there's no Bellator on next weekend, there's no PFL on next weekend, there's literally nothing. You've got Cage Warriors and a pretty big boxing event, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to research the Cage Warriors card, and you're going to get a Cage Warriors prediction video out of me in a few weeks time, but for now, I'm just going to kind of matchmake the Dana White's Contender Series Season 5 from Week 5, from 2022. When their debuts and who I think that they might debut against, who I think that they are going to debut against. And to start off, you've got Denise Gomez. And Denise Gomez, she's actually already made her debut. She lost her debut on short notice to Loma Lookboonmee. It was a pretty fun fight to watch. It was pretty competitive somewhat. And I think maybe the next matchup you've got to give her is just someone that hasn't won in the UFC yet. And I think that maybe Nala Young could be a very exciting fighter, or even Melissa Martinez could be pretty good as well, as Martinez is a pretty good striker for the most part. Gomez likes to strike as well, so I think that could be a pretty entertaining fight. I highly doubt Estela Nunes is actually still on the roster, but if she is, just any of these three, I think the girls that are ranked below her make sense to me. Maybe if you wanted to put her in there against Diana Balbita, you could get away with that. Maybe even Yasmin Lucindo, but I think Yasmin Lucindo would win that matchup. So if you want to get Denise Gomez a favourable matchup to start off her UFC career after a loss in their debut, you probably give her one of these three girls, and it will probably be a pretty competitive fight and a good fight. Cameron Simon, he looked amazing against Josh Wang Kim. He's a pretty young guy, to my understanding he's like 21, 22 years old. And the name that I have here for him is Jay Perrin. Jay Perrin recently lost to Yuri Kaling, but I don't think he took too much damage in that one. I think it was a pretty fun matchup as well. And I think that's a fight that makes sense. Daniel Santos recently just beat John Castaneda, which is kind of crazy. Maybe you could test him against Simon Oliveira, but I think that might be a little bit too much of a jump. And if you're not going to test him against Simon Oliveira, or you're not going to give him Jay Perrin, I was almost looking at Guido Canetti as well, because he's 21 years old. Guido Canetti's 42 years old. It might make sense just to kind of have that massive distance in age. That could make sense. That could be a logical debut, but I think Guido Canetti is probably going to fight Raul Rosas Jr., if you can actually believe me on that, because I think that would be something that the UFC could do. Guido Canetti, 42 years old, Raul Rosas Jr., 18 years old at the time of the fight. That would be an amazing marketing for them. So I think they're probably going to do that. So with that in mind, I think you're just going to give him Jay Perrin. I think Jay Perrin's a guy that makes sense to put him in there on his debut. And Jay Perrin, I guess at this point, he's 0-2 in the UFC. He doesn't really have much bargaining power to kind of say no to a fight like that, Or even you could do Damon Blackshear, but I think Damon Blackshear, coming off a draw against Yusuf Salal, might be looking at like an Aori Kaling matchup, or maybe even a little bit higher up in the rankings potentially. I know it was a draw, but probably not someone to give someone their debut. Jesus Santos Aguilar, this is actually a weird one, because the person that I actually want Jesus Santos Aguilar is Clayton Carpenter, who's 6-0, and he fought on Dana White's Contender Series, got a contract off Dana White's Contender Series. But if you're not going to give him that, I think you probably are just going to have to give him any of these guys. It's a weird one. I think maybe you give him Dennis Bondar. Who really is there for him to debut against at 125? UFC flyweight rankings are kind of all over the place. A lot of pretty decent guys at the bottom, because there's only 35 people in the whole division. Daniel Lasota's already got a fight booked against someone making their debut whose name has completely slipped my mind, but he's making his debut against someone. He's probably going to get knocked out in that matchup as well, by the way. I think Dennis Bondar, to my knowledge, Dennis Bondar doesn't have a matchup. Charles Johnson doesn't have a matchup. I think they would be pretty good matchups to making his debut, but honestly, I don't think they're very favourable matchups for Aguilar. I think he's kind of in a tough spot at 125 about who to fight, because this guy Juan Camilo Ronderos is never coming back for sure. So I don't know. It's such a weird division. Who do you give him in his debut? Maybe Carlos Hernandez. I don't know. We'll see who he fights. Darius Flowers, a very good friend of mine and a very good friend of the channel. He shouted me out in one of his most recent interviews. So thanks for that shout out, Darius. I really do appreciate it. And honestly, I think there's a lot of really good debuts to be made for Darius Flowers here, because the UFC have so many guys on the roster right now that don't have much bargaining power over who they're gonna fight next. You offer Darius Flowers to any of these guys at the 170 pound division, they have to accept because they're winless in the UFC. So anywhere from AJ Fletcher down, I think makes a lot of sense. Martin Sano, I highly doubt he's going to come back. So you can't do that. I think anywhere from AJ Fletcher down is a pretty logical debut. Maybe him versus Lewis Koske, I was thinking could be a pretty entertaining fight, but he did just fight very recently. Maybe you could do him versus Adam Fugit. That would be a pretty good fight. Adam Fugit's a pretty good striker, throws a lot of kicks. But a fight that I do want to see down the line, and I think that a fight that the UFC might make eventually, is him versus Josh Quinlan. There would be a banger of a fight. You guys know I don't really like Josh Quinlan, like, whatsoever. He has kind of popped twice under USADA since getting signed to the UFC, which is a weird situation. It's a tough one. Like, he popped for, like, legitimate roids against Logan Urban, and then he was meant to fight Jason Wood, I think in Nevada, and they wouldn't put on the fight because Josh Quinlan popped for something, so they had to fight in another state a week later. Just a weird one, but I think that would be a banger fight. Probably not for his debut, though. I think if you're going to give him a debut, you want to set him up with a great fight. And a fight that I think will be very entertaining is him versus AJ Fletcher or him versus Adam Fugit. Maybe even him versus Mike Mathetha. But I think Mike Mathetha's probably trying to look to fight someone like Darian Weeks, Pete Rodriguez, or someone like that. I don't really know what Mike Mathetha's trying to look at right now. He's 3-2 in his professional career, and it's not looking too good. Michael Parkin, though, made his debut once again. I don't really know what to do with Michael Parkin because I'm not too impressed. I picked against him to make his Dana White's Contender Series, and Eduardo Neves. If you watch this fight, Eduardo Neves, honestly, he gassed out in a minute and a half. In fact, he gassed out in the first minute of the fight. He's throwing power punches. He was landing on Parkin. Parkin was eating on them. And then Neves just gassed out. Like, completely gassed out. And Parkin just wrestled him and then got a submission. But before that, all he has fought is guys with losing records or 50-50 records. Even his amateur career, losing records or 50-50 records. The one guy he fought a decent opponent was this guy who was 5-0 at the time. Fought him to a draw. Like, it's just like Michael Parkin, like, where's his ceiling at right now? I can't tell you. He does bring a pretty good ground game, so if you want to match him up against someone that he's probably going to be able to defeat, you might give him Dontale Mays, because Dontale Mays got out-wrestled by Hamdi Abdelwahab in his last fight. Or you could give him Lukas Brzezinski, who got robbed by Martin Buday. I think Lukas Brzezinski would probably win that one, but once again, Lukas Brzezinski is a guy that has been popped for the sauce, so it's a pretty tough one there. I don't know how many people are going to be signing up to fight him, but yeah, I think Michael Parkin versus Lukas Brzezinski is a pretty logical debut. I think him versus Dontale Mays is a pretty logical debut as well. Or you could even do him versus Justin Tafa as well. Justin Tafa is coming off a pretty good KO win, but I think that would make sense too. I think Justin Tafa would win that matchup, but or even Jake Collier if you wanted to go up more. It's just a weird division right now on who you're gonna put him in there with, because he has only fight 6-0, sorry, over guys with terrible records, and then over Eduardo Neves, who gassed out in the first round. So we actually don't really know how good Parkin is. But yeah, I think it's a weird one to put him in there. Like, who do you give him? But I think if you're gonna give him a debut, you're gonna have to give him Dontale Mays, or you give him Lukas Brzezinski, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my video, man. Let me know what you thought. I'm a little bit tired right now making the video, which is a shame. But I thought I'd put out a quick video. Just for you guys, because there's no UFC on, there's no Bellator on, there's no PFL, there's no major promotions. You got Cage Warriors. I'll make a Cage Warriors prediction video probably tomorrow or the day after. I haven't researched the card, so you're gonna have to give me a little bit of time to do that. Looking forward to it though. At least there's some sort of MMA going on. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my weekend next weekend, but I might have to touch some grass. So I'll see you in the next video. I'll probably just still be making daily videos, but there'll be quick ones like this. So I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.